if we look at like the way that companies are built, it is truly bit by bit, human by human. And the right people make the right companies. And because of that, talent acquisition is truthfully the most important thing that any company can do at any moment of any day. The second question that I usually ask folks is, what do you want your relationship with work and life to be like right now? At this stage of your life, there's different answers for everybody. And I think it's like very reasonable to ask it in such a way. And there's plenty of people that will say, I'm happy to work as hard as possible, but I also need to be able to sign off and spend time with my kids. You're going to get great out of me during X hour. That's not the wrong answer by any means, but to understand what they want. Because again, the other part of that is they're telling you that. You're not dictating the intensity to them. They're telling you that this is the intensity that I'm excited to sign up for. And is it matched? That's really what you're looking for.
This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. Today, we have Patrick Circelli on the show, who is the head of talent at Cognition. Sadly, we brought Sile with us today as well. We'll deal with that later. Patrick, what's up, man? It's good to see you.
Great to see you. Yeah. And happy to have Sile here as well, too.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone with a bit of decorum.
You know, it got to be nice when we just keep winning games. We've got to, be nice to our international friends,
I love that. All right. So, Patrick, I want to start with, I think being actually a good picker of companies is a really important skill, but is not talked about very often. And you've picked two generational winners. You were previously at Scale, and now you're at Cognition. What is your secret to picking these amazing companies?
Yeah, it's a tough question because I actually think that like the biggest answer to it is just being really lucky. I think the other like actual underlying part of that is like putting yourself in a position to be really lucky, of course. But to get to the crux of like your specific question, and I think I understand what you're asking, is like, look, like the thing with being a recruiter is very similar to like picking companies as well too. And what I like truthfully believe in are like, there's two main parts to like a company, right? Like one of them being the product, right? Like you have to, fundamentally believe in what you are building. That obviously naturally shines through in every conversation that you have with a candidate as well too. I think probably the more important piece of the puzzle for me was, do you believe in the founders? I think like one of the biggest things that I found at Scale, and what I was really excited about with Alex was that like as a leader, he was an individual that was one, always like very in tune with where the space was and where the space would be going. And two, he put himself in a position to be ahead of the curve on that as often as possible. For example, our government space, right? And I joined in the September of 2021, and the hot thing at the time, and for most of Scale's focus was computer vision, everything for autonomous vehicles, really. And we were really great at that, and that was the area that we were going to continue to focus in. When I was interviewing, the question was, how would you find a head of synthetic data? Because that's what the focus was for autonomous vehicle and visual data sets, right? And I would say probably like 4% of our business at the time was like, we had been working with OpenAI on GPT-2 since 2019, right? Like we were starting to work in some of the language models that they were building, and we just continued to position ourselves really well inside of that facility. And then so when things started to ramp up and they were ready to drop GPT-3, they knew who they were coming to, and we started to see that like transition and shift. And Alex just knew well ahead of ChatGPT's launch that like we should probably gear up for all these other labs to come after us and ask for more. And so what I'm getting at is that like Alex had a really good vision on where to pivot the company, right? And continue to grow into. And I think that's like very true. And like what you're looking for as a recruiter is like somebody that has, when you're looking at any candidate, somebody that has that sort of like, forward thinking mindset. And it's the same when you're picking founders. I would choose to follow a founder. And if Alex called me, I joke about this. I actually don't, know that this is true. But if Alex were to call me and be like, "Hey, we're gonna go build trash cans," or like that was part of like the thing that we were gonna sell is like trash compactors. Like he must have a reason for it, right? Like I'd follow the leader, right? And not so I don't know about trash cans, but I think more important to me than anything else outside of the product was important and the mission was important, but the leader was more important there. And so I found Cognition, to be the same. Scott and Russell have the same sort of ability, and Stephen and Walden and the team there have always been forward thinking. And when you're exploring and you're talking to people, you find that out pretty quickly in the conversations that you have. And when it's right, the direction, speaks for itself. But again, I was just very lucky.
The two founders, Scale and Cognition founders, they used to work together, right?
Scott and Alex knew each other from the competitive programming days.
Yeah, I've definitely heard them mentioned together in some sort of like some context like that. That tracks.
Stephen, one of the other founders, worked at Scale. Was one of the engineers at Scale early. And then Russell also worked at Scale, was, the individual that asked me, how would you hire a head of synthetic data, right? In my interview, right? And he had been there for a few years as well, too. And so yeah, there's a lot of ex-Scale folks at Cognition. Like I said, the luck piece definitely comes in. But the Scale mafia, I think, is growing, as they say.
You guys are also, both of those companies are notoriously known for being very intense. Did that show up in the interview process? And then how do you think about that personally with your own life, walking into like two companies that are going to be hyper intense?
So I wouldn't say it showed up in particular in the interview process for either. I would say is that I kind of knew or expected that going in. Given the stage that I was exploring, the stage of company that I was exploring, I kind of expected that to be the case. I'm also the type of person that thrives in that environment, and so I sought that out. The things that I think that like did shine in the interviews when talking about intensity was like how do folks respond to that, right? Like and what is the intensity driven behind? And I see this at Cognition every single day. Everybody's really bought into the mission. And you talk to our engineers, it's a very interesting problem for engineers to be building the future of software engineering, right? I think it's like extremely exciting. And so you hear that the mission is there. Of course, you want to build the next generational company. The intensity piece, though, is very true. We had some very intense moments. I think that intensity has different perspectives, or can be viewed differently by different people. And like I said, I was seeking that type of environment. I happen to thrive in that type of environment. And then I think this is a common thing for recruiters, but if we can move faster on candidates, right? That's a good thing.
Can you elaborate on what you mean by intensity can mean different things for different people?
Yeah. So I think like, the mission, of course, like the mission driver behind it and the way that people respond to things help drive the way that like, maybe a human reviews or receives intensity, right? So for example, there was a time at Scale where, we were making this pivot, like I talked about, from computer vision into working, primarily on large language models. And naturally, right, like we had a pretty intense time as we needed to hire, very quickly to be able to scale up to meet those demands. The demands were insane, right? Like every model lab was coming after us at that time, and trying to get as much data as possible. If the way that you heard that being phrased was, we're pivoting, we have a brand new thing to focus on, I don't care what you were working on previously, you're going to change and we got to work on this now. That is a much different response of like, hey, here's the company directive, right? Like, here's why we're doing this. This is actually the future of things. We've spoken to the right individuals, and the right leaders at these language model companies. You've seen the success of ChatGPT. This is the direction that we really believe is going to take us to the next level. It does not mean that what we were doing previously was not important, but this is going to what's going to make the company thrive in the next 2 to 5 years at the very least. That's a much different answer. The outcome was the same, right? The outcome was always going to be, we've got to hire 100 people, right, in the next 3 months or whatever, the remit was at the time. But the way that you hear it is very different. A lot of that comes from the way that it's presented and the communication style of the leaders that you're working with. But so much of it also comes from like the ears that you have on your own head and like the willingness to hear it a certain way. I firmly believe that.
What about now though? Like we've on our side, in our hiring at MetaView, we've gone through a few different questions that we ask for, trying to basically communicate to the candidate that we're building an intense culture, we have an intense culture, and also sort of test them on whether they really mean it when they're up for that. do you have ways of assessing that very specifically, or you obviously don't want sort of too many chill folks, getting to the final stage and getting into the company? You must have a way of weeding it out a bit. What do you guys do at the moment?
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of very very standard things that you could probably ask to get to the bottom of things. Hey, I would imagine you guys are already asking about like why MetaView, right? Like why is this the company that you're speaking with? Out of all of the opportunities and the places that you would consider, why us? And there has to be some level of like belief or non-belief in like the answers that they give you. Of course, there's always going to be a candidate that's going to spin it the right way, and it may sound great, and maybe is not the case down the line. But like 90% of the individuals should tell you the truth, and you should suss that out, pretty well with the amount of conversations I imagine you're having. So like, there's no way that you're telling true from false at this point.
And to be clear, you're asking that why MetaView, and you want to hear something in the answer that is essentially because I'm looking for something really intense, and this looks really intense. Is it maybe not as obvious as that, but
that's part of it. But like, I actually like really the answer that I would probably want to hear about like why MetaView is, and I'll speak to we hired a talent engineering intern, right? Like, and this is a very similar question that I asked him, right? Like, you're a CS major at Stanford, right? Like, you could literally go get an internship in whatever sort of software engineering environment you wanted to be in. Why talent engineering, right? Like, what excites you about that? And the answer, truthfully, is actually very similar to what I would expect for somebody, why MetaView was like, if we look at like the way that companies are built, it is truly bit by bit, human by human. And the right people make the right companies. And because of that, talent acquisition is truthfully the most important thing that any company can do at any moment of any day. The second question that I usually ask folks is like, what do you want your relationship with work and life to be like right now, right? Like at this stage of your life, there's different answers for everybody. And I think it's like very reasonable to ask it in such a way. Like, because and that's all we're looking at, right? Like, and there's plenty of people that will say like, I'm happy to work as hard as possible, but I also need to be able to sign off and spend time with my kids. You're going to get great out of me during X hour. That's not the wrong answer by any means, right? Like, but to understand like what they want their own individual, because again, the other part of that is like, they're telling you that, right? Like, you're not dictating the intensity to them. They're telling you that this is the intensity that I'm excited to sign up for, right? And is it matched, right? Like, that's really what you're looking for.
Tell you what I really like about, because when I was asking you the question, I was purely thinking about something like the second answer you gave, which is basically like a direct way to understand how much you about this life, like irrespective of the company. Like, are you down for what we're doing, down for the hard work that building a great company entails? But your first answer, which is food for thought for me, was much more about mission alignment. Because I think basically, if you're going to maintain that intensity over time, you have to understand the mission. You have to be down. You have to actually be interested in the mission. Otherwise, it's just a transactional, where I'm plying my trade for a while.
100%, right? And the last part of this all is that like, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Like, we're obviously it's going to be a squeeze, but like, what am I as a human going to get out of this, right? Like, and naturally, I'll speak to Cognition's sake, and I believe it to be true about MetaView as well too, and many companies out there, is that you're going to be in an environment where you're going to work with people that are better than anywhere that you've ever seen before. And what that often does for anybody is it actually elevates their own skill set, just naturally. You see it on sports fields, you see it in any role that you think through, but like, it will give you the opportunity to continue to grow and stretch beyond what you thought was possible ever before. We're also growing at an incredible rate where there's a lot of upside and all the fun stuff that comes along with it. But like, the why is there, right? Like, it's always got to be about the why.
That's actually a better frame than the question we used to ask at DoorDash, which is, what's the hardest thing you've done in your life? Because that's more of like looking backwards. Asking people about like what they want their relationship with work to be is more forward looking. And I think it's a better frame. I talked to some of the XAI guys a couple years ago, and one of the things that they brought a new term into my life, which I hadn't heard before, and they were using it about me, which was like, Nolan, you've graduated to work heaven. You have the right to like work, like 35, 40 hours a week. Like, we don't like people who have graduated to work heaven. We want people who want to work all the time and want that to be a huge part of their life.
When's Elon going to graduate to work heaven? He's still not graduated. He's still out there grinding.
That was the point that they were making, which was like, we don't do well with people who have had some modicum of success and now are downshifting. Even if you've had mega success, you need to be in seventh gear all the time here. And that's what matters for our culture. And I really appreciated it because it was illuminating for me of like, that is not what I want. Right. And this is the whole thing with recruiting is it needs to be a fit on both sides. And asking those types of questions is very illuminating for what type of candidate or what the candidate wants moving forward in life.
Your last full-time role was Carter, right?
I was a founder, but yes, full-time not being a founder. Yeah.
Obviously at the time you were all in, but if if they'd asked you, hey, what's like the long-term goal? And you just said, well, at some time I want to downshift and take it easy. Do you think that that would have been fine as long as you're saying I'm down now? Or do you think that sort of setting that long-term objective would have actually, sullied the name?
Well, one is like at that moment in life, I wasn't ready to downshift.
I mean, like if you're asking about their long-term ambition.
I don't think asking about long-term ambition is and I don't think that's what Patrick's getting at. Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. It's like, you're asking like right now, what do you want your relationship with work to be?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I think it's actually very revealing, right? Which is we don't give a shit about what you want in the food. What works for you right now. And that's very illuminating for like what's going on in that person's head and what they want their life design to be like. We have this whole thing with like work-life balance. And I think it's the worst conversation. Like it's so stupid. It's all life. Everything we're doing right now, this is life. And you should be opting in to the downside trade-offs of whatever life that you choose. When I was at DoorDash, Carta, and Building Continuum, it was 70-hour weeks on the low end, right? Of just like always on, always thinking about it. And I was like down for that thing, which meant the downside trade-offs for me was like, my parents didn't hear from me as much. My best friends from high school, like I was very incommunicado on the text thread. And that was fine for me at that time. The thing that changed for me was kids. And the earnest conversation for me is like, and I think actually people are very dishonest about this. Kids in 80-hour work weeks really don't mix.
Yeah.
They don't mix super well. And so you have to be really down.
I think if you want to be really harsh about it, it's being a very present parent and 80-hour work weeks don't mix. But there are lots of people who have kids who opt out to the downside trade-off, which is why I'm not going to be as present. And they don't. And some people might do that callously because they don't give a shit about their kids. I'm sure that's very rare. Most of the time, people are doing it because, well, I think it's worth it for what I can achieve for them and do for them. But obviously, you may have a personal opinion that they're sort of undervaluing the living in the moment with the child, of course. But I still think that there's people who make that trade-off.
You're exactly right. That's way more precise.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually do see, and there's plenty of folks here at Cognition that do have kids. There's plenty of folks at Scale that did have kids. But again, it's who's subscribing to the presence factor, right? Like is really the question. It is tough. I mean, and it's a very similar question that I'm like, I'll always ask. And I asked, and my wife and I talked very in depth about before I joined Cognition was like what's the runway that we have for me to be able to go at the same speed that I know I'm capable of before we begin to pull back and shift back into fourth gear or third, right? Like and move into what was it called? Career heaven. One of these days we'll get there, but I knew that like consciously I'm still in seventh gear.
Hell yeah. So last time we talked, your team was about 8 people and the company was about 300. Is that like roughly where you still are today?
I'd say roughly, yes. I mean, we grow at the clip of like 10 to 20 hires a week. So slightly above that. The recruiting team is still about 8, but we have some new folks that are going to be joining in the coming weeks. And I'm going to be interviewing some more. We've got a lot more hiring to do and more growing to do, but that is, still roughly correct.
So what's the secret on how you keep that recruiting team so lean, yet Cognition's talent density is infamously so high?
So this is the age-old question that I think every company should be asking themselves. When I talked about like why Cognition, right? Like after Scale, how did I get here? And like all the beauty of it. Part of the other factor that I was evaluating is like, I've worked with bad hiring managers before in my life, right? Like I want to work with partners that actually like care and believe that one topic that I talked about earlier, that talent acquisition is the most important thing that we could do. And you hear a lot about founder-led recruiting, and I actually think that's like the best thing in the world. And that's exactly how Scott and all the founders and Russell, like everybody is at the company. And it's easy to do when there are 30 people. It is much more challenging to do when it is 300 people. But today, and in 2026 alone, our referral rate is about 50% across the company. 50% of all the hires that we've made have been referrals. I actually would strive to make that 70 or 80. I think like we're doing a great job, but it should be higher. And I think that like founder-led recruiting has transitioned to what I would call just company-led recruiting. Our recruiting team is, equipped with like the ability to go find the most amazing people in the world. But we're also really, really smart at how do we find the most amazing people in the world. And a lot of that is through everybody else's networks. We're also very lucky. We have, Devin at our helm, and there's a lot of incredible AI systems out there that we leverage day to day to facilitate tooling and to be able to find the right people. But I do think that like so much of it is who do we know when we open up a new role, for example, right? Like, great, who in the company would know the right person here? What companies do we believe have done this really well? And where did people from those companies at the time that we think they did it really well go next? Right? Like, so we're actually quite surgical with like the places that we start our searches with. And very rarely, unless this is an evergreen role, and we have plenty of evergreen, sales and deployed engineers, there's evergreen roles. We're going to continue to look. But unless it's, evergreen, like we should probably talk to 10 to 20 people at most and hire one of those because the pool should be that tight. We should be that prescriptive early on in the process. And again, I think that's like allowed our team to be what I would look at as just like the most operator type recruiter than ever before. I don't really like talk to the recruiters very much about like, you've got to source the 100 profiles a week and you've got to hire this many people per quarter. Like the things that I actually would like to motivate and like, the entire company around is, our referral percentage, our time to hire, which company-wide is about 19 days, and our offer acceptance rate, right? Like we should, make sure that we start with the right people that we believe are really great at the role. We should move really fast to get those people because the likelihood is that they, only have a very small window that they're open and interested to making a change. And we should stop at absolutely nothing to get that person in the door. And we're so far really successful at that. And I think we have the right methodologies around us to like continue to do that really well with a small team. We need to grow. We're not going to stop at 8. We need to grow for sure. But we're positioned very well to do that correctly, I believe.
Okay. So one of the things you said in there is that you're not like measuring the standard recruiting inputs for outbounds a week, which is, I find in this era of recruiting, like everyone has gone back to measuring really hard. What are you measuring your recruiters on?
Influence is the answer. But like the ways in which you measure influence are both like numerical and non-numerical. And numerical truly comes down to like the speed and oftentimes like the time to close, right? Like if a recruiter has done their job really well, they have taken a candidate through the process faster than you would normally expect. Average time to hire across like it's like something like 35 to 43 days, right? Like across most companies, they should beat that time frame out. But the time to close should be as minimal as possible. It should be 2 days at maximum. It really should, because you've done your job really well in influence from the get-go. And influence, right? Like non-numerical comes back to how well are you setting your hiring manager up with the right information to do that really well? How well are you, sourcing right through the right internal talent pools and finding the right individuals to get those folks in the door really well? And how well are you driving that conversation with the candidate, right? Like you should very much so be the person that influences if they have enough or not enough information by the time an offer comes in the door, right? There's always, by the way, there's plenty of outlier candidates that don't accept their offer within the 2 days that we have as our average, right? Like right now. But the bulk of the candidates accept very quickly, right? And it is because I think we've done a really great job, both the recruiter and the hiring manager, as a team in partnership to manage that cycle. effectively. And so I talk about, those, like, the speed is like truthfully the measurement, in my opinion.
2 days to accept the offer. Like, I know how tight the talent market is for the types of folks you're hiring for. Lots of talk about big sign-on bonuses. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. The point is that, like, if we are X months away from AGI, then, like, why should we let like operational things like, sign-on bonuses stand in the way of getting there faster, And so, like, we should like have a conversation about what the right ways are to land this individual. We've certainly lost candidates that have, like, gone to a different environment because that met their mission that we talked about earlier, like, more importantly and more closely to what they were looking for. The other part of, like, that, compensation piece is, we believe that, like, we've created a sort of like a benefits culture that has, like, yeah, again, simply, right, like, enabled individuals to do their best work because we remove the operational logistics, as much as possible from, like, their day-to-day lives, right? We believe that if you're here for the mission, that you should be along for the same ride that everybody else has come along for the mission for, right? Like, that's truthfully, like, what we're doing here as a company. And culturally, right, like, candidates that we get through our process and we want to hire, I mean, we interview for that factor, right? Like, we want to know, are you bought into the mission?
What do you make of the whole hey, we'll cover your Ubers, we'll do your laundry, we'll do everything? Because obviously some people, could think about it a little bit, like, sort of a little bit infantilizing of people. What do you think?
So I feel like it's one of those levers that if you want to hire fully formed adults, they really appreciate. I've gone through this whole cycle in my life to be like, okay, like, yeah, these benefits are amazing. I worked at Google in 2012 to where it was like we were having sushi every day for lunch. That's not what Patrick's getting at. Like, I thought that was like great benefits, but it's actually not. Like, what great benefits are in my mind is what you just described, which is there's so many aspects of my life that I just don't want to think about if I'm to do my best work. Like, getting to the office. Okay, everyone's having, like, our RTO is like, I think, everyone pukes when they hear that statement nowadays. Like, great, it's expected to be in the office, but how do you get there? Like, what does that look like if we're working in a big city? Like, I can tell you, when I was at DoorDash, I was in Menlo Park at the time and we were in San Francisco, and that was a Caltrain ride plus a 25-minute walk both ways. It was like 75 minutes, not excluding, some sort of like fatality on Caltrain, which would make it like 3.5 hours. That was brutal. Versus when I drove into the office, especially if I woke up early, it was 45 minutes, but we only had one car and my wife was going in a different direction. And so that would have been an example of, like, you probably would have gotten another 90 minutes of solid work out of me if that stuff was taken care of. Similarly, like with kids, and like now, like, if I think about laundry, like, through the course of my week, it's like that thing that I know I have to get done. And if I'm doing it on Saturday, I'm just kind of grumpy. I'm just like grumpy about doing laundry on Saturday. I'm like, I should be like enjoying sunshine or like letting my mind release so I can like let the good thoughts like channel in about how I'm going to go and use my brain space for work. I still think about work all the time, regardless on whatever day it is. But when I'm doing laundry, I'm like pissed off and I'm not thinking about work. I'm thinking about how brutal like my time is spent. So I actually think it's probably today, because Google bastardized it so much, and an underused lever. Like, I think great benefits is one of those things to, like, it's not that much more to do it.
It's a relevant point because rationally it just makes a ton of sense for exactly what you said. Like, we're going to work so hard to hire these amazing people. We, might give them, we'll compensate them incredibly well. And like these relatively cheap things to make their life easier. And I must say, but then equally sometimes, and similar to, on the weekend, if my wife asks me to do something, the amount of like entitlement I have thinking I shouldn't have to bloody do this is like, I also think it's like a little bit weird, but as in I don't love it in myself, but equally rationally it's correct because I've got like very high leverage things I could be working on that aren't the laundry or something.
So the last thing I want to hit on is, so when we did our prep call, one of the things you and I got to talking just about, like, I'm in market and I'm just like talking to great people and I love talking to great people, but I find that like most internal recruiters, even agency recruiters, will exclusively optimize for like, I have this role open, and if the shape of the person doesn't fit this opening that I have in front of me, they're just not worth my time right now. Versus when I talked to you and I was telling you about some of the amazing people I was talking to, you like, would you intro me to that person? What's the thought on hiring for a specific shape? Like we're hiring for go to market, right? Like we must hire for versus kind of like this, like there's amazing people that exist in the world. Maybe we don't have something open for them right now, but we should still build a relationship. How do you balance that? And how do you think about that with your own recruiting team?
Yeah, I think it's correct, right? And you know, whenever you want to intro those people, I'm so happy to talk with them, which would be great. I think the answer is truthfully that like, why should we only hire for certain shapes of roles, right? Like of course we need these types of people in these shapes of positions, but like more importantly to me, right? Like. What does this individual bring to the table? We talked about like what companies have done this really well in the past, right? And uh, when we look at those types of companies, obviously we believe that they did it really well, but they're not doing it for Cognition, right? Like we have just a different model, we have a different product, we have a different belief, we have a different go-to-market strategy, everything, right? Like and talent structure, whatever you want to call it. So why should we expect that person to fit exactly in what we need, right? Like it just won't happen. So we should find out what that person is actually really great at. And maybe it's close. Maybe we have to reshape the role a little bit to fit this individual and then find somebody else that's actually really great at the things that they're not. Or maybe it's that we come across great people all the time and we should just continue to find those great people because again, today they might be interested in making a jump to do something incredible. But that might not be true in 2 weeks. And maybe in 2 weeks, we have something that happens where we need to think about a brand new product offering or a brand new market strategy or whatever it might be. And that person would have been really great, but we lost them. Right? Like we should honestly try to find the most incredible people at the world, see what they would be incredible to do here at Cognition. And sometimes that means that we should build a role around that person. Other times, for what it's worth, also, not always, it's not 100% the case that like we will build a role around you. But it's about 90% of the time, right? Like we should find great people and bring them here, right? Like we should get amazing people at Cognition. And what would they be great at? Okay, there's a chance that that's going to be really successful for us. Let's go after it. One of our cultural values is literally go for it all, right? And all is a pretty all-encompassing word. It doesn't leave, like anything else on the table, right? Like if our shapes fit in these spots, but then there's all of the stuff in between the shapes of the roles that we need that are inclusive inside of all, right? So like, yeah, we should probably find a space for them.
Sile, how do you think about that as a founder? Like, I'm assuming you as a founder, you're like, that's what I want my recruiting team to be doing too, which is just like turn over every stone, especially for the best people.
We've got a lot of hiring to do on a lot of those evergreen roles that you talked about, Patrick. And that is like, we're very just locked in on, frankly, our sales, customer success, or we call it engagement, and engineering hiring. And like, to be honest, we're not really talking about much else. So, I don't think there's a ton of, now in terms of like seniority of this, hey, this person's actually a bit more sort of tenured or experienced than we're expecting. Yeah, like total flexibility. And on the other side as well, people are more junior, like tons of flexibility. So I guess we have it there, but not in terms of, hey, there's this like, there's this different skill set we weren't thinking of. Shall we bring them in? That doesn't happen for us very much. Maybe we need to open our minds a little bit or just increase our capacity to like be able to think about that. But right now we're not doing it a ton.
I think it's also like I mentioned, I don't know that there's, it's always that there's plenty of the times that like, we recognize after interviewing somebody that like, hey, like we're actually like not well formed enough as a company to be able to bring this person on. And we should be honest with that person, right? Like, and we should tell them that. But there are plenty of times where we come through and we say like, yeah, actually like, okay, here's the strategy in which we would want this to happen. Recognize that like, there's nobody else that's owning this, right? Like there's like levels of support that you probably will not have that you may be expecting, right? Like, and we're on the same page with all that stuff. I think like from a recruiter lens, the way that this like generally happens, one, again, we're spinning in, like very prescriptive spaces of like, what are the companies that we believe that have done these things really well? Who are the individuals that we believe have done this stuff really well? And let's expand through those networks, right? Like I like to think about it in nodes, right? Like in that sense. And when you just happen to like spin off, say it again, it is maybe like the customer success or engagement folks, right? Like you happen to find people that like, you have this prescription on, we want this person to be be really great, have done it in this, type of environment previously, have the experience and skill set to be able to do X, Y, and Z. You find somebody that like has done it in a different type of environment, and that environment happens to be in a market that you didn't think you were ready to explore in, right? Like, for, the world of like VCs, right? Like say this person has done it really, really well, but like specific to private equity firms and venture funds, right? That's not your immediate sort of like ICP of like what you're looking to hire. However, maybe you're like, what if we broke our door down there, right? Like, and maybe that's the direction that we need to try out. And maybe this person actually could like, be just the facilitator of the conversation too. Maybe that's not actually the person that you want, but maybe it sparks it like, let's spin up a roll around this. Like, let's test, and see what we can do. This is probably something you've already thought about, but like that's the idea of like kind of how these things are born. And generally when we just meet folks, this happened all the time. We were hiring for the head of synthetic data. I keep bringing back up, right? In the very beginning of my time, and I'm talking to these folks, they wrote incredible research papers and all these things. And, one of the individuals was like, I've never led a team before. But I am a machine learning engineer on computer vision data sets. And so I was like, okay, you're not the right role for this role. Let me go talk to other team members that I know and other hiring managers that I know are looking at things or maybe not looking at things. And the more that you have conversations internally, the more you find out, maybe a hiring manager is like, well, actually was kind of like exploring this. We don't have a role built around it, but like this actually something is maybe I was interested in doing. And so like, the comfort level inside of the company is like what allows that to like really, facilitate as quickly as possible.
The other piece too is with candidates, if you're playing the long game of relationships, they will often, we often bake the recruiting process around a person, but they also have their own networks as well. And so the more smart people you're talking to, if you're leveraging it appropriately, you could be leveraging their network as well. I talked to a candidate yesterday who declined an offer, which was very sad for me. And he's amazing. One of the best people I've ever talked to in my recruiting career. And, he let me down easy, but I was like, hey, who should I be hiring for this role? And it's his best friend. And I talked to that person today. And that's also a pretty interesting person. And so I feel like just being around good people, if you're asking the right questions and you're curious and you're playing the long term of like, I just want to have a relationship with you and be friends, can lead to many second order benefits.
There's a specific person on our team right now who's incredible. And she's done an amazing job. Who we first interviewed for that role was actually her roommate. We interviewed that person. Candidate experience is everything for us, by the way. We gave them a great experience. We actually let them know that they weren't, we're not moving forward with them for the position, that it wasn't the right fit. And she came back, she was like, you should hire my roommate. She's incredible at this instead, right? Like, and so we interviewed and we spoke with that person and she is also, by the way, does not have experience in that role specifically, but is so creative of a thinker and like so down to figure it out that she has done a phenomenal job in that position that she's in right now. And we just created a good experience for somebody and they wanted to help us out too, just like you did, right? Like is just make it right.
Exhibit A for why AI is not going to take all of our jobs.
Correct. Very much so. That is a very human thing to happen.
Patrick, thanks so much for taking the time. It's a blast, man.
Thank you, guys. This is fantastic. I really appreciate it.